Joe Vennare, thank you so much for joining us. I've had the pleasure of knowing you for quite some time. I mean, it's almost a decade now, I think, when we were both starting off in fitness content online. But in the past few years, you and your brother actually have developed a really cool niche within the niche, let's call it that, within the fitness space through Fitt, F-I-T-T. And you cover in many ways the business of fitness. So like, what is this industry doing? What does it look like? How is technology factoring in? If you don't mind, for those who might not know, give us like the elevator pitch for Fitt and the kind of things you all cover.
Definitely. So Fitt, Fitt.co, what you mentioned, is basically a discovery platform for health and fitness content. So a few years back, we saw the opportunity around Eater and Thrillist and Infatuation, a lot of these sites that basically tell people where they can, go to a bar, get a burger nearby. And there's really nothing like that for fitness. So we created that for gyms and studios, juice bars, hiking trails, things of that nature. And we've taken it from 1 city to 30 cities, kind of scaled that business up along the way to be able to do some booking. So now you can find that yoga studio and in another time when yoga studios were open, you could register for classes. And MindBody, who's a big booking platform in that space, is an investor. So we're working with them to pilot booking kind of in a bigger way. And then when it comes to the business of fitness and wellness, we also have a vertical newsletter and podcast called Fitt Insider. And that's really focused on what's happening really in a quick evolving, fast evolving industry. Everything from, we really target it towards the investors, the entrepreneurs, and the founders who are doing everything from connected fitness to wearables to just wellness more broadly. So try to cover it all.
And one thing I'll warn readers of, this isn't a warning, this is a celebration. There's going to be some inside baseball here. This is a podcast where you're going to learn about how a lot of the fitness industry really works behind the scenes from the business side of things. So that's something I'm really going to pick your brain on, Joe. And I do want to back it up just a little bit. It's Fitt.co, Fitt.co. It was originally Pittsburgh, correct? Because you started off in just that one city of Pittsburgh.
Man, taking it way back. It hasn't been that long, but yes. So I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, based there. I'm there now. And we started just as a hobby, David, as you mentioned to begin with, I was doing a lot of writing kind of across the web on all types of health and fitness content. And as a side project, a hobby almost, my brother and I said, hey, why don't we post some of these things that we see and come across ourselves in Pittsburgh, just for people to see. So farmers markets, run routes, where you might go on a hike, hidden swimming holes and things like that. And people really seem to like it. So from the time that it was a black and gold Pittsburgh site till now, it's evolved quite a bit. And now we drop the Berg and it's just Fitt. But yeah, very humble beginnings and no intention of doing what we've done to this point.
So when was that moment, or about when were you like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go all at this and we're going to make Fitt, Fitt.co a thing.
I think there were really two things. And that's a great question. The first was when people started coming to us and saying, hey, how do we do this in our city? So friends that had maybe moved away, or people that I went to college with or had worked with in the industry were like, why don't you do this in Boston or New York or Cleveland or Portland or wherever? And we thought, wow, maybe there is an appetite for this beyond just a side project and maybe some, at that time, maybe passive advertising revenue to the extent that exists. And that kind of gave us the, hey, why don't we try to do this? We actually took some of our own money and bootstrapped it from that first city to call it 5 cities. And then at that point, we were able to sign on some pretty big partners, UPMC Health Plan, which is a big insurance company here in the region, as well as some of the sports teams. And that led us to the first group of investors were actually the family that owns the Pittsburgh Pirates. So they were kind of our angel pre-seed funding. And then last fall, we did what is like a typical institutional round, Mountain State Capital, which is a VC firm, and then MindBody joined as well.
I love following you on Twitter. I subscribe to the newsletter. I love hearing what you all push out. You recently, well, I saw it first through you all. I'm not sure if you officially broke it, but the Lululemon acquiring Mirror, the kind of connected at-home fitness company for $500 million. I saw that on your Twitter feed, got your newsletter blast about it. So you're really on the cutting edge of covering these things. Why did you decide to open up this vertical that is really not, it's only tangentially related to the original core business of Fitt?
The idea initially was totally self-serving, to be honest. We looked at the initial platform and said, hey, we need to get partnerships. We need to get advertisers. We need to get API integration. We're relatively nobody in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So how is it that we're going to get to these folks without just cold calling them or leveraging our existing network? Let's create really compelling content. And that started, just about a year ago at this point. So it's grown rather quickly in terms of the demand and appetite for it. But from there, when we started to see like, hey, people are really enjoying this, and then we looked at the industry in terms of who's covering it in detail, you see there's really old school players, maybe a club industry or like a health and club racket industry newsletter.
Yeah, they all have health club, racket, something. And I'm biased. I've actually spoken at some events put on.
Yeah, they're great.
Like that. And they're great, but it's just like the names just kind of seem like they're a bit from a bygone era.
Yeah. And so you very much got that vibe that it was big box gyms that they are focused on. How do you operate a health club? All of that, which is great. And we can talk about how the landscape is shifting. But then on the flip side, the only other thing that existed was, every now and then Fast Company would write about Peloton, or they would write about SoulCycle, or whatever the big popping name brand was. And we thought, wow, we have a lot of insights with operators, investors, executives who are really deep in the weeds. Maybe we can kind of land somewhere in the middle to give people who are just kind of interested in the consumer aspects some insights, but then operators, some really in-depth kind of insider baseball, like you mentioned, info to help them with their careers and network.
What are some of the companies that you have covered that you think are kind of most relevant to strength athletes right now? And maybe if they're not super relevant to strength athletes right now, should probably be on their radar moving forward?
100%. I'll start super close to home. I mean, Rogue, when you look at Rogue and what they've been able to do in transforming the landscape, scaling up their business, especially how it relates to COVID-19, now with the kind of whatever controversy you call it at CrossFit, them stepping into the industry and potentially having a more leadership role as that continues to evolve. That's huge. I think they're going to continue to define that landscape. As you go down that path, someone who's kind of closely related to the CrossFit industry is OPEX. So OPEX obviously training a lot of the athletes at the games. A good buddy of mine who's also has some Pittsburgh roots, Jim Kroll, who used to be the CEO at OPEX. Yeah. Talked to him on our podcast.
We've had James Fitzgerald on our podcast as well. It's like a cool thing what they've built there. Yeah. And a lot of roots, like way old school in the CrossFit community.
100%. And so what I kind of take pride in is being able to take these things that are central to the landscape as consumers might know it, or as different athletes or exercisers know it, and relate it to some of the new evolutions that are coming out.
I was thinking about this in preparation for our conversation today, and I was swinging my kettlebell earlier this week, one of my kettlebells, and I was like, you know what? Like, this seems really old school, and this seems like something that is like the least technologically advanced. But 10 years from now, am I going to be swinging the same kettlebell with that same kind of cast iron, or depending if it's a competition bell, like stainless steel finish, and there's going to be a chip in there and an accelerometer, and it's going to be a connected kettlebell. So I'm still getting that same experience, but then I can get on the app after and like track my force output or something like that, right? Is there a way to transfer that old school experience with new connectivity?
Yeah. And quite frankly, those things exist, right? There's some early stages. There's a company called Jax that is a kettlebell that does some of this stuff. And I do believe, we'll continue to see it evolve, and people will track it, and they will gamify it, and they will measure progress and range of motion. And a big thing that's happening right now is like, how do you translate, especially for strength training, right? This is dangerous potentially if you don't know what you're doing. And there is a learning curve. So when you have somebody like Tonal, what they're saying is like, we're reinventing the system of strength training to make it not reliant on, you have to have a personal trainer, you have to go to a physical location to do this. And there's even a conversation, I talked to the CEO of Tonal on the podcast, and he said, hey, we might open physical locations, not just showrooms, where you can come in and work with a personal trainer, learn how to use the equipment, and then use yours at home as well, which I think is smart. But at the end of the day, the thing that nobody has been able to crack, at least to this point, is willpower. Look, you still have to swing the kettlebell, right? There is an element of behavior change that comes along with it. So to the extent that the industry is growing and people are buying these devices, a lot of it is marketing, and a lot of it is building a brand around this aspirational product, and, some social signaling that might come along with having these different devices. And the people, at least right now, who were going to find a way to exercise anyway, would go run in the park, would do push-ups outside, are the people that are buying these and using these because they just want the next latest and greatest thing. So there will be a tipping point where it's like, how do you actually crack the code of adherence and willpower and behavior change to affect like a broad swath of people? And I think that's what I'm most excited about.
We all have these surprise points, or at least I can point to these surprise points where I've been surprised about the business of fitness and how valuable it is. Could be monetary value, acquisition. Lululemon's acquisition of Mirror for $500 million recently. We're not even a month out. We're not even 2 weeks from removed from that, I think, from that announcement. Surprised a lot of people. They're like, wow, that is a huge acquisition. Mirror was a company that had raised a lot of money. Like they saw themselves having that high valuation. To some, it was a surprise. To some, it was not a shock, right?
Right.
Do you have that moment or those moments that come to mind where you were surprised by whether it's like the value of a company that they're raising at or that they're acquired at, or it could be when someone announces like, hey, we have this many customers now and we're touching this many lives. What kind of metrics have started surprising you, or do you remember that stick out to you since you've been covering the business of fitness?
Yeah, I think probably a few things, and just to give listeners some context. So when you're talking about the health club industry, the brick and mortar gym industry in the United States, it's like $30 billion a year. And more broadly, when you think about like the wellness industry, so everything that goes along with taking care of yourself, it's a $4.5 trillion global industry.
Whew.
So I think, getting into a lot of those numbers, I think those things really surprised me as we started going down the path of like, do we want to create this vertical, and is there enough to cover broadly? And it's just, there's been a changeover more recently, call it in the last, probably 30 years, where people have the luxury of taking care of themselves, of spending money on not only their personal well-being, going to the gym, but everything from skin cream to supplements to vitamins to vacations that are all geared around like well-being and wellness more broadly. So when you start to look at those things, it's like, this is a huge part of our lives. And as we focus on doing that, it's only projected to grow going into the future. So then when you look at things like Peloton raising, hundreds of millions of dollars before they went public. And even at this point, they have 1 million users, or 1.8 million users they were going on their last earnings call. That's still such a small piece of the population when you think about all the people just in the United States. It's a fraction. And you look at companies like maybe an Aptiv, which is an audio training app. I think more recently they said they have 250,000 members. 250,000 members out of all the people in the world that could be running, which is their main focus. It's like there's still so much room to grow. So I kind of think about it maybe the inverse of like, these numbers are massive now, but as it relates to all the people that could be using it, wow, is there so much more room and upside in that industry?
But what other kind of verticals within fitness, or even recovery, we could call that, or nutrition? I know that's something you've been tweeting about a lot. What are those next kind of sub verticals within wellness that you think are ripe for innovation, that we're going to start seeing innovation within in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, man, we could go all day.
This is the Pandora's box question, right?
There's a lot of cool stuff that I'm excited about. I think one area potentially is what we've kind of classified as the high performance lifestyle. And it's this transition between what is fitness and what is personalized healthcare. So you see companies like 8 Sleep, which is the mattress optimizing and tracking your sleep. Obviously the Oura Ring, which is a wearable. You have companies like Levels, which is a continuous glucose monitor that kind of tells you how your body reacts to different foods that you eat and if there's glucose spikes. And all these different companies, HyperIce, which is a recovery device, much like the Theragun, and all these things that are like, how many devices and gadgets can one person have for recovery or performance or optimization? But it goes back to that point, right? That people are willing to spend anything that makes them feel better. If it can make them feel better in the end, like they're going to throw down some money on it. So it's this evolution of not just fitness, but like, what does personalized well-being mean to me? And then what are the products and services? You can even go further down that path, and you get, telemedicine companies like Roman or Hims and Hers, who are giving you the things that you want based on, some level of personalization, some level of telemedicine and convenience, all down this path of like, how do we make it more accessible and convenient for the end user?
What are some of your high-level thoughts on the impact that COVID-19 will ultimately have on the landscape of physical gym locations?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be pretty devastating, I think. I am not in the camp that thinks this is the gym apocalypse, that this is the end of gyms and we're not going to have working out in person. I just think there's too much to be gained from the community, from the environment. I used to own a CrossFit gym, so I'm a former affiliate owner and trainer. I know what it's like to have that community and to build that from the ground up. And I don't think that you can replicate that at home with any device, short of creating an entirely VR world. And I think that's far, far off in the future, right?
Yeah.
I'm also not in that camp.
Like a Ready Player One for fitness, right?
Yeah. I'm not in that camp either that thinks that's around the corner. But just on the gym memberships alone, I read something the other day that was the industry can expect to lose $10 billion in value through the end of the year, just on memberships to traditional health clubs. And so there's no way around it. It's just like restaurants. It's just like any business that relies on somebody coming through the door. I think what you will see is, one, it comes down to a lot. Is it a big brand name gym that has the financial backing of investors who are willing to get them through this period? And so you see companies like Planet Fitness, who's doing pretty well considering that everything's closed, while 24-Hour Fitness is in bankruptcy. Gold's Gym is in bankruptcy, just got bought out of bankruptcy yesterday. And other gyms like Town Sports International, who's considering bankruptcy, they're just going to restructure. They're going to go through this process of really closing some locations, laying people off, and coming back potentially stronger than they were. That game is a little bit different because it's a real estate game. A lot of them, they own these locations, and it's what is the value of this real estate over the long term. On the flip side of that, when you look at a lot of CrossFits and boutique studios and yoga studios, a lot of them are mom and pop shops. They're just people who are super passionate about what they're doing, and they're month to month, they're day to day in terms of that paycheck. And if they can't get in a position where either they work with their landlord to come to some type of agreement that we're going to suspend payments, or work with their staff to furlough them and hope to bring them back on the other side of it, it's going to be tough sledding. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of the closures is on that like kind of smaller sole proprietor or small group owned places.
Beyond that, where's the best place for people to follow the work you're doing? It could be it on the kind of subscription and access model of Fitt, or the side of covering the business of fitness.
Yeah, I think the insider.fit.co is where folks can learn about the newsletter. There's also a corresponding podcast. I'm on Twitter. I try to keep the content coming out there, as well as maintaining the day-to-day. So just at Joe Vennare, my name. And otherwise, just super willing to connect and eager to engage with folks who are interested in this space and be helpful any way we can.
Awesome. Well, we'll include all those relevant links. And Joe, I really, really do appreciate your time chatting about something a little different on the BarBend podcast today. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.